Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adrienne Gould, and I am a program analyst at the Department of the Navy Office of Small Business Programs, led by our distinguished director, Mr. Jimmy Smith. On behalf of OSBP, I would like to welcome you all to our event today. We started this webinar series during the COVID-19 pandemic as a way to continue our outreach and keep small businesses up to date on pertinent issues. We received such rave reviews on what we were presenting. We have committed to doing 2 to 3 webinars a month, realizing that small businesses are a catalyst for innovation. So we're trying to use this platform as a way to attract new business partners. You can review previously recorded events at our website under the Outreach and Past Events tab, or you can visit our YouTube channel. I'd like to direct you to our website, www.secnav.navy.mil/smallbusiness, where you can find a wealth of information to include the Dawn OSBP Business Operations Plan. You can locate your small business professional, and you can find out more information on how to do business with the Department of the Navy, and also view our Major Command's long-range acquisition forecast plans. To stay current on OSBP upcoming events, you can register for our mailing list on the homepage of our website. And to stay up to date about upcoming industry days, Major Command outreach events, and a variety of information across the Department of the Navy, we encourage you to connect with us on social media. So you can go to facebook.com/NavyOSBP, all caps. You can go to twitter.com/Dawn_OSBP, all caps. Or you can go to LinkedIn and just search Dawn OSBP, all caps. For your information and to mark your calendars, our next few webinars on April 22nd, we have one of our PTACs talking about DoD matchmaking events. On April 29th, we have the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Procurement's office is going to talk to us a little bit about NASA. On May 4th, we have the Director of the Air Force Office of Small Business Programs, Mr. Scott Kaiser. And then on May 13th, we have Kathy Muley from the Office of Naval Research coming in to talk to us about export controls, ITAR, things like that. Should be interesting. Today's speakers, we have 2 speakers from OUSD, ANS, Industrial Policy, the Office of Foreign Investment Review. We have Mr. Ike Blanton, who is the Deputy Director for International and Strategic Engagement. And we have Ms. Alexandra Gambardella, who is a strategic operational research analyst within the same office. I hope you use this time to ask questions of our speakers as we go through or at the end. Try and use the Q&A function. I would like to let you guys know that the entire session will be recorded, and the recording, the Q&A, and the presentation will be posted on the OSBP website, probably in about a week. So if you have a question, it doesn't get answered, don't worry, we'll get it to both Alex and Ike. We'll vet it through them and we'll get the answer posted. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Ike and Alex.
Hi, greetings everyone, and thank you for having us. We're excited to be here. I'm speaking for Alex, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. Like I said, we're really excited to be here, and we think it's a great opportunity for us to do outreach and to speak to the many small businesses who really do drive the innovation for the Department of Defense and also for the United States. And we think it's a great opportunity, and we really appreciate and love what you all are doing as far as these webinars go. Alex, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. This is a very exciting opportunity to be able to work with you. We try to be able to work with our DoD partners, but also incoming DoD partners, so that way we can find strategic ways to advance economic security and innovation.
Great. So again, thank you, and we'll go on into our presentation, which is on CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the risks and threats involved in some foreign investment, but also a little bit about what our office does. Today we'll talk about the business threats and threats of foreign capital, including the Chinese threat, and what that means to businesses like yours, as far as technology transfer that might arise from inbound investment, outbound joint ventures, and possibly insider personnel, and what DoD and specifically the Office of the Secretary of Defense is doing to protect those areas. And mainly it falls around the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS, and how we use that to protect U.S. businesses and U.S. national security.
Yep, and then we'll also use the opportunity to talk about different ways DoD is looking to promote industry partners and also best practices for your business moving forward.
So a little bit about the threat itself, and this comes from basically many different areas. China does not use a single source or a single method to try to access U.S. information, U.S. intellectual property, U.S. secrets, or U.S. technology. They do it through a multitude of different threat vectors, from non-traditional collectors to joint ventures that include the forced transfer of technology, to research partnerships, and using front companies and other legal and regulatory means to gain access to U.S. technology and U.S. advantages.
Yes, and so as you can see, there's a multitude that involve financial capital and human capital to advance in certain particular technology sectors to advance China's strategic goals. And so we see that there's lots of policies and laws created to provide incentives to these Chinese companies and investors to target specific technologies.
And as Alex just said, these really go to promote China's strategic goals to gain technology advantage, or to become a comprehensive national and international power, to have China's goal to have an indigenous, innovation-driven economy, and also to modernize their military. And luckily for us, they've written these goals and published them in both their Made in China 2025 program, as well as their policy of military-civil fusion.
Correct. So yes, so as you can see, there's Made in China 2025, and then the military-civil fusion policies and regulations we find often blur the lines between civilian and military end users. So as these lines are blurred, it's not necessarily clearly defined between a clear defense industrial base and the commercial sector. So there's a lot of overlap there.
Right, and the two work together to reach the goals of the other. Right, it's a symbiotic relationship between the Made in China 2025 and military civil fusion, like Alex just spoke to. So I guess this gets us to where the risk is, and the risk to businesses, both large and small, is to the transfer of the U.S. technology advantage and of U.S. technology. And China's total IP theft is estimated to be anywhere between about 200 billion to 600 billion. It could be far more. It could be right in that range. It's a really difficult concept to analyze and come to a concrete number on. But really, what we wanted to point out is that this does not just go to emerging technologies like robotics and AI and semiconductors and areas like that. It's not just things that you only see in Star Trek, is how I like to joke about it. It's also traditional industries like manufacturing and mining and transportation and aerospace, because there's a lot of special.
Oh yeah, so the threat and risk of unauthorized intellectual property transfer doesn't just go to the emerging technologies. It also goes to traditional industries and into the special sauce that allows them to have lean and effective manufacturing capabilities. So when we use the term intellectual property, I want to be clear that it's not just patents and trademarks. It also goes to corporate trade secrets and anything, I like to use the term special sauce, that differentiates your company from others and allows the firm or the company to produce things either at a higher quality, at a cheaper rate, or a faster rate than other companies.
Move on. So here we have a few different examples of Chinese IP theft to show that it's not just specifically one particular area. As you could tell, it's commercial, energy, businesses, defense businesses, anywhere from standard, the chip in your phone to the,
to the seeds
Yeah.
that our farmers use,
Yes.
right? And really, we use this as an example to show how China has targeted many of these areas. And to go on to the next one, these are actual documented cases of China targeting certain technologies within the United States. This is all open source. This is all publicly available. These are cases that were either documented by the company themselves or documented through journalist research, or documented in FBI's filing of charges against certain individuals. So, and as you can see from this, it really does range from everything from analytics at Moody's to GE Aviation, high technology aviation area.
right, and it can range anywhere from a large company like Boeing to small businesses. So it's not just these big brand names that are being targeted.
So we talked a lot about the threat and the risk, right? So we would be remiss if we didn't also point out that foreign direct investment is not all bad. That it's not what we're talking about is not necessarily representative of the whole. That there's many areas where foreign direct investment is a positive thing and represents a positive area for growth for the economy. Most foreign direct investment comes from allied nations such as Japan, Canada, the United Kingdom. The vast majority of foreign investment comes from those places and is meant to assist the United States and to help the United States grow with international access to international markets and also access to. Hi, yes.
Ike, I think we lost your slides.
Okay. We'll try to get that up. I think Alex might want to.
Oh yeah, I was just going to touch on as I was talking about that we see that the majority of our foreign direct investment does come from allied partners. It's not necessarily that we're not here to discourage you from FDI and working with partners, more just to inform you on the risks that could be associated with that. Back up.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And so with all this, while we're sharing it,
yeah,
we don't want this to be the scary moment that everyone looks at every foreign acquirer or foreign money as though it is evil and trying to get their secrets, right? That's not the case for the vast majority of foreign direct investment. And apologies again for all the technical difficulties today. I'm not really sure why we're experiencing so many, but okay. So as far as foreign direct investment goes, foreign direct investment from China does have an increased risk just because of their stated policies, like we spoke about with military civil fusion and their China 2025 initiative. Those initiatives create it so that there is an interest of companies, both state-owned as well as private Chinese companies, to acquire U.S. technology and for that technology to be used by China's military. And as we all know, any advancement in an adversarial or strategic adversary's military decreases the lethality and the advantage of the U.S. military, just by definition.
Yep. And then just to touch on that, while the U.S. is a large destination for foreign direct investment, China contributes only a small amount to that. It's just, as we showed in the previous examples, there have been documented cases of IP theft through Chinese investment.
So one example of this, and one example of how China uses the intellectual property, however it's acquired, whether through copying or forced transfer with joint ventures, or simply a reverse engineering of the technology, is Huawei. And they use these various strategies and various threat vectors to acquire a multitude of technologies from other companies, whether, like I said, through joint ventures in China to gain access to the Chinese market, where they gained access to the technology through forced tech transfer. They also gained access to technology through reverse engineering of hardware, and also through a simple hacking of U.S. companies and also worldwide companies. This threat is not only to the United States; it's a worldwide issue. So what we're alluding to, and what we're trying to present here, is that China used these various technologies and various threat vectors to gain access to that technology, to build its own supply chain and push out other smaller suppliers and even larger suppliers, so that they would own the supply chain from the start to the finish.
And then to move on, so as we can see, there are different avenues in which China circumvents U.S. investment regulations and employs these tactics against U.S. companies so that they can acquire these assets and gain this inside access. So that can range anything from leveraging partners in joint ventures to gain intellectual property through forced tech transfer. There's also combining cyber campaigns and collecting personal sensitive information from these tech firms. We also have seen it kind of range from private equity to also just members paying premiums in U.S. acquisitions to target particular distressed U.S. companies.
Yeah, so and really what this is an example of how companies, this is not just, again, to the United States, that early stage technology companies are vulnerable because they're stuck between a desire for quick funding and guaranteed exits to get that foreign capital and the capital options, and the ability and need of China to gain access to that technology. So it's the Department of Defense recognizes that this is an issue, that technology companies want to get to market as fast as possible. I mean, most businesses do, so that they can gain access to that market and have a product available on the market as soon as possible.
And then here we kind of run through two different examples in which companies are particularly vulnerable at the innovation stage, and how CFIUS, which is a valuable tool, is not always able to protect at every stage of the process. So for example one, we have a lithium battery company that is producing lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. They may receive US funding through SIPR funding or awarded contracts. And then at this early stage, that's when they become vulnerable to form a joint venture of production with an adversarial country, and this joint venture escapes the review process for us. And then that foreign relationship is already established, that started under USG funding, and also at a stage where this technology is still being innovated and isn't necessarily highlighted for certain export controls.
And just to mirror that, this issue is not just for small businesses, it's also for large and medium-sized businesses as well, because there's another example. And again, we don't use business names here just because as far as CFIUS goes, everything is confidential. But there was a large business company that received heavy cyber funding at their start. But later on, they received a strategic investment from a large Chinese state-owned enterprise. That's what SOE stands for, just in case. While the investment was not controlling, the investor gained access to a board seat and then gained access to some of the technology through the technical means that were shared and technical details that were shared with the board. Because it was shared with the board, because the technology was so cutting edge that it was not yet on any export control list. So the sharing of that technology was not controlled through export controls. And because the investment was not controlling, at the time, there was no access or no jurisdiction for CFIUS to cover that transaction.
So here, this is outside of, I guess, financial capital interest. For human capital, China has multiple programs to recruit different talent, whether that's through research scientists, through students. And so these are just a list of the few that have been documented and that we are aware of. And this isn't to say that all students coming who are non-US students are here to gather a sensitive intellectual property. This is just examples of where there are policies in place to promote that.
Correct. Yeah. And again, this is not a everyone is bad just because yes. They're from China. It is more just to make everyone aware that China does specifically have programs for the recruitment of Chinese scientists that are going to the United States to use them as non-traditional collectors. And what we mean by non-traditional collector is someone who is not directly employed by the intelligence community within China, that they use to collect intelligence on the United States, whether that is technical details of information and breakthroughs and intellectual property, or that is actual other information that they're using to that individual to target. So before we get into some of the more detailed and in-depth discussion of CFIUS itself, wanted to open up for any questions about anything we've talked about thus far to see if there were any comments or questions or anything that we might be able to provide additional detail on.
No, I don't think yet anything's come up. Ike, you guys have been very descriptive in what you're talking about, so we'll just wait until the end.
Sure, great. So where we come from, what our bread and butter is in our daily activity is the CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And CFIUS is a 9-member agency that includes not just the Department of Defense, but also various other agencies like the Department of Energy, Homeland Security, Justice, the United States Trade Representative, the Department of Commerce, the State Department, the Office of Science and Technology of the President, and the committee is chaired by the Secretary of the Treasury or Department of Treasury. So with that, you'll see that the red and blue on the screen for the various entities, and that's because CFIUS is split between national security agencies and national prosperity agencies. And that split was purposefully done by Congress and made to represent that, because every transaction that we review and every investment in the United States should be viewed through both lenses, because many of the transactions may pose a national security threat, but they also may pose a national economic incentive or prosperity incentive for the United States. And those two things should always be weighed. And with that, we do weigh those, and we look at each individual transaction in and of itself. In 2019, so the reason we talk about 2019 data throughout this rest of this presentation, by the way, is because we get all of this information from a public report that the Department of Treasury presents to Congress that is made public, that presents the previous year's details, its annual report on the committee. And the 2020 report has not yet been released. So I know it seems like it's really old information, but that's where we are in talking about this. So with that, 2019, we reviewed a record number of transactions, both DoD and the committee. And China has greatly increased their transactions that we review.
Right. And then also in 2018, FIRMA was passed, which is the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act. It's a mouthful. Did I get that all right?
Yes, you got it right.
Sometimes I have to check. So this actually expanded the scope of certain transactions that would be considered covered transactions to also include certain non-controlling investments or real estate transactions.
Right. Yeah. So let's see. So just sorry, I wanted to see what the next slide was. I forgot that I had them right in front of me, actually. So just a little bit more about CFIUS and the CFIUS process. When CFIUS is generally a voluntary process and one where a company that receives a foreign investment, they file with the committee for us to review the transaction. That filing is quite long and quite in-depth and includes a significant amount of information both on the company itself, but also on the foreign investor. And using that information, the Secretary of Treasury, Department of Treasury, provides that information to all of the other members of the committee. We review that filed information, and the Department of Defense also includes, internal to DoD, includes 35 other reviewers, including the various military services and agencies. So, for instance, Navy in this case is one of the services that reviews, but also we would have like R&E, research and engineering review as well. So those 35 reviewers look through the transaction and try to see if there's any risks to the United States government and particularly to the Department of Defense. And we look at risk through the threats, the vulnerability, and the consequence. And the threat is the actor or actions that might have access or additional vectors to a U.S. national security centric item through the investment. So really the threat generally comes from the investor. And then we look at the vulnerability, which is the item itself. So in many of the cases, for instance, that we're talking about with this group, that would be the technology itself. So whether or not DoD uses that technology, whether or not that technology is a capability that DoD,
whether or not it's going to be a capability that DoD could incorporate into their programs in the future. Right. So that's where emerging technologies can fall under, or innovative current technologies that are currently in innovation stages.
And then we look at the vulnerability. So Alex, can you talk a little bit consequence. Sorry, I'm sorry, consequence. Thanks.
Yes, no problem. So when we're looking at the consequences, we're looking at the compilation of threat combined with vulnerability to determine what the end impact would be to overall national security, how that affects the DoD equity, or also how that can affect the defense industrial base as a whole.
So, and with a lot of this, it seems very opaque and very difficult to understand how DoD and the committee itself are judging these risks. And part of that comes from the fact that all filings are completely private. If you'll notice, the committee does not publish who filed or any information, or even confirm whether a company has filed with the committee. All of the information that is gathered, all the questions that we ask, all of the answers provided to those questions are completely confidential, both from the public perspective. So we don't release any of that information whatsoever. So I think there was a quick question about the y-axis. I believe the top is right at 300. Sorry. In 2019 is I believe a little bit right at 250 cases approximately. So great question. Thank you. Happy to answer.
Are there any other questions relating to the CFIUS process that we could answer in particular?
Not right now.
All right, great. We can take more questions at the end as well. So here in this approach, you may hear certain people throwing around the phrase getting to the left of CFIUS. And what that essentially means is acknowledging the fact that CFIUS is a valuable tool, but there are other ways in which companies can be proactive about securing their intellectual property and their interests. And a lot of times, engagement at the earlier stages of this investment provides us more clarity, whether that's earlier in the supply chain or just working with partners to be aware of the risks of certain capital coming in. And there is that phase in which companies are still innovating and developing their technologies where they could be more susceptible to adversarial capital. And so we're here just to identify those risks so that way companies are aware and are performing proper due diligence on the certain capital that they would be receiving at that stage.
And one of those, and there's multiple ways that DoD is looking into doing this. We can't speak, I'm not an expert on any of these, so I am happy to take your questions to someone else or try to arrange for other people to talk about these at this forum. But these range from purchase commitments and credit programs to also the Trusted Capital Program, which is also under the Office of Industrial Policy, where our office falls. So we do try to work hand in hand with the Trusted Capital Program in that if we identify a company that is a likely target of a foreign investor, we can assist them through any of these other means.
Yes, and these programs are to help critical DoD programs at different sizes access that capital at that developmental stage where they're particularly at risk. This is just some more information for you on the Trusted Capital Program. As Ike and I were saying, we're not necessarily experts in this particular program, but we just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of the different opportunities available to them.
So now we get down to where the actions can come. And this is some of the advice that we generally provide to companies. And the first and most important one, it says to scrutinize the ultimate beneficial ownership structure. And what it's talking about is the ultimate owner of any investor that's looking to invest money in your company. And really, what that comes down to me is being curious, right? It's easy not to be curious when somebody's trying to throw money at you, but I think that we should all remain curious as to where that money is coming from and who is actually making that money work and be directed at your company. So with that, we say to scrutinize the ultimate beneficial owner. Like I said, I would just summarize that to say, be curious, try to understand where they are. Don't just assume that the ABC Corp from the Cayman Islands is really owned by the Cayman Islands. Odds are there's someone behind ABC Corp in the Cayman Islands. And it might be that it's DEF Corporation out of Cyprus. The money probably doesn't stop there either. So I would always just summarize that that you look beyond the initial value.
Right, and then also other things we have on here is to implement certain cybersecurity strategies and isolate intellectual property. I know a lot of this conversation has been about emerging or foundational technologies, but you may say, well, I'm not developing a critical DoD technology, but you may have access to or data that could be also at risk as well. So there is different strategies you can put in place to protect those.
Right. And then any type of insurance protections that you might be able to do that that provide a greater deal of certainty to your company, and also may be able to advise you on best practices with regards to cybersecurity that you might have. And I think that again, I'm not an expert in this area, but I think the CMMC is the start of a DoD program that's trying to do that as well. So I do see, that's the end of our presentation. So what we'd like to do is open it up to questions. I see a question about CFIUS review from Michael about how does a small business submit technology for review under CFIUS? And CFIUS doesn't generally do preemptive reviews of a company. We're happy to talk to a company generally about our processes and how we might look at things, but we don't do preemptive reviews of a company or its technology. What would happen is if a company does have a technology that they believe DoD may be interested in, they can do, and they are approached by a foreign investor. That investment doesn't actually have to occur at that moment. You can file ahead of that investment. So not only is there, so as Alex mentioned, there's the FIRMA, which updated CFIUS, and that is the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act. And it added another avenue for companies to file for CFIUS called the declarations process. It is a quicker process and a much more overview process and much more paperwork friendly to do.
And this is also for if you're questioning whether or not this transaction would fall under a covered CFIUS transaction, that is an avenue in which we would be able to determine that.
Right. And if you're still not convinced either way, reading through the application process, I would suggest that an experienced CFIUS attorney is probably the best value there. Michael, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Ike. Another question. So I see all the different agencies that you work with, but being that the Department of Commerce kind of tracks all the U.S. commodities, they work heavily with the small businesses and manufacturing stuff. Do you work fairly closely with them on this type of program?
Yes, we do. So the Department of Commerce is one of the reviewing agencies for CFIUS. So while we're reviewing for DoD equities, we're also working with our interagency partners with their review process as well. And so as if we are reviewing a company for a risk, we'll reach out to them. They may be better suited to answer certain questions that we may have and vice versa. So there is a constant communication throughout that process.
And there are at least weekly meetings by the committee that discuss all the cases and case-specific meetings throughout the week that we go through all the details and we talk to the subject matter experts from the various agencies.
So DoD's review isn't solely through DoD lens. It's also aware of the other lenses that are taking a review of that case as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Another question. For basic research, I saw on your charts, you know, you have some companies, you have some labs, and I saw academia. How often do you see that they're trying to get into academic basic research or patents that they're working on?
So that would not normally be covered by CFIUS, but
okay.
As far because CFIUS would require a company to be purchased. It requires an ongoing business, okay. But that doesn't mean that those areas of research aren't targets for adversaries, whether through non-traditional collectors or through other investment means.
Okay, great, thank you. How does the Corporate Transparency Act relate to FIRMA and CFIUS, or is there no relation?
So I'd say there is a strong relation because, like we were talking about, as far as best practices. Sorry, I keep skipping around just to make sure we're on the same page, literally on the slide. So when we talk about scrutinize the ultimate beneficial ownership structure, that's really what we're talking about. And the corporate transparency allows us to do that with much greater ease than without that. So we do the same thing when we have a case. We scrutinize the ultimate beneficial owner or investor as well, and that act allows us to do it much easier than without that.
Okay, great, thank you. We have another one from Michael. Many small businesses can't afford an experienced CFIUS attorney. Is there a website that provides access to initiate the declarations process?
So there is access. So declarations and CFIUS cases are submitted through the chair of the committee, and so that would be submitted through the Department of Treasury. So you can go to the Department of Treasury website, and they do have information on how to submit a case for CFIUS review or for the declaration process.
Okay, great.
Let me find that site real quick, and I can put it in the chat.
And then from a small business perspective, I know that you guys work with the larger companies on this, but how far down do you think the awareness is of this issue with our supply chain, like the second, third, and fourth tier supply chain?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question. Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
Well, awareness that foreign investment on the bad side is even an issue that they should be aware of. Do you think the second, third, and fourth tier companies know about this? That they could be targeted?
I guess I can't speak specifically to their general awareness, but I guess something that we have seen is that as you go down the supply chain, there is less transparency. So we do recommend that if businesses do have an extensive supply chain, that they try to be more aware of what their own partners are doing, not only who are looking to invest, but who you may currently work with as suppliers.
Yeah, I would also say that the further removed you are from the U.S. government, the less likely you are to be aware that this would be an issue.
Yeah, especially because some of maybe the fourth or fifth tier suppliers may not even be aware of the end product that their own products are going into.
Exactly. Okay. Okay, great. Well,
But again, we don't want to presume knowledge of their understanding, because I think that is almost a little pedestrian, because I don't want to. They might have a former CFIUS attorney running their shop, right? Like, I don't want to presume that, because I think that that's a bit presumptuous, right? But I think that generally speaking, the further away you get from the U.S. government, dealing with the U.S. government, the less likely you are aware that CFIUS is even a thing.
Right. And so that's why, as I stated earlier, when we were talking about getting to the left of CFIUS, having a breakout of your own supply chain or just more awareness and transparency is one way to do that, to secure your own supply chain.
Okay. Thank you. We do have a question here. Is there a government group to follow in LinkedIn that can provide updates on this?
I don't believe there is a LinkedIn specific. I guess, as Ike was saying, the Department of Treasury does release information on their website as well. So they can provide updated statistics, but there isn't a LinkedIn specific website that I'm aware of.
Okay, great. Let's see here. I think that's all we have right now in the Q&A in the chat. I'm sure there's going to be some others come in, so we'll certainly get back with you. So at this point, I would like to thank our speakers today, Ike and Alex. Phenomenal presentation, a lot of information that I think was probably helpful for people. I know it was helpful for people. Again, we do record this session. We record the Q&A, so it will be posted on our website. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. And if you have a particular topic that you'd like to see a webinar on, please email us at osbp.pao@navy.mil. They're all caps in the beginning, and we will we'll make sure we get this covered for you. So until then, everybody stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.